The Queen Anne's County Planning Commission for Thursday, June the 13th, 2024. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Meeting minute review.
Skipping public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. Do we have any? Okay, meeting minute review.
Madam Chair, I'd like to submit the approval of Queen Anne's County Planning Commission minutes for May 9, 2024 as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? Updates, legislation and legal matters.
Good morning. I'm Amy Mordock, Planning Director. I have a few updates, and one is that the Governor's Accessory Dwelling Unit Task Force has rendered its final report. That was a 9-month-long process. I just wanted to give you a brief summary of the action items that came out of the report that are recommendations. There are 4 recommendations to pursue legislation. Not all of the legislation that is going to be recommended through the Department of Planning is related to planning matters, though some of them are. And my role as a MACO representative and my partner's role, who was the urban and suburban representative, her name is Lori Paris, and she is with Prince George's County. I was representing a rural perspective. Our role on this task force was to make sure that it was understood the role of local government in terms of implementing housing initiatives, and basically with the nationwide housing crisis that we see. Some of the roadblocks to affordable housing may be connected to permitting roadblocks, but not all of them are. A lot of them are well beyond the scope and purview of a local jurisdiction's planning requirements. A lot of them are state and federal. A lot of them are market-driven. So just to know that it was important, and we had a really great diverse group at the table, but from a regulatory perspective, it was my role as a MACO representative to ensure that there was a reasonable consideration for what a local government could actually implement. So one of those items, there were 4 items, as I mentioned, that we might be seeing legislation on, and I'll keep you updated. One is ensuring a by right approval of an accessory dwelling unit. That is already the case in Queen Anne's County and in many jurisdictions. In some jurisdictions, that accessory use is not a permitted use at all, or it may be a conditional use or special exception. But that is already in line with our zoning code, so it wasn't a very big lift for me to support that. But it did seem to be a reasonable request for a local jurisdiction to permit that accessory dwelling unit, as I kept emphasizing an affordable housing option. If we were looking at the housing crisis with an emphasis on affordable housing, I kept trying to steer this conversation to focus on incentives that would ensure that accessory dwellings are affordable, rather than, not that there's anything wrong with it, but not to have opportunities for investment or even short-term rental, because that really was not what the task force was asked to look at. It was really asked to look at this use to provide affordable housing. So the other two, there are 2 more that are connected to zoning, and one of them is looking to waive impact fees for accessory dwelling units, and the other was to waive additional hookups in terms of if you have a house that is served by public sewer or public water or with private well and septic, the legislation would ask that a new line or a new system would not be required. So with both impact fees and these infrastructure pieces of legislation, from a MACO perspective and from our perspective, I really emphasized that a lot of that isn't within our control. Impact fees are very broad, and asking a jurisdiction to waive an impact fee should be considered very carefully, because there are services that have to be provided, whether you're a rural or an urban district, and the same with septic hookups or well hookups. There are Maryland Department of Environment requirements over which a local jurisdiction doesn't have much control. So as that legislation gets teased out, MACO will be involved just to make sure that position is considered. But just to let you know, our impact fee provisions do waive impact fees for accessory dwelling units if they're meeting the affordable housing provisions of our inclusionary housing provisions. So affordable housing is already incentivized through our impact fees. So in a way, that was easy to support as long as they're, again, affordable housing. There are 2 other pieces of not legislation but other recommendations that came out of this work group, and one of them is to ensure that parking requirements are not used to exclude accessory dwelling units. This was more of an issue in an urban setting, and so the recommendation is that guidance be given to jurisdictions to make sure that parking requirements do not prohibit off-street parking and on-street parking. Especially on-street parking is a very big deal in an urban environment where there is not adequate on-street parking, and often inadequate on-site parking as well. So, but that, to my knowledge, parking requirements have not really prohibited accessory dwelling units in our area, and certainly not in Queen Anne's County. And there's also a provision to look at lot requirements to make sure that lot requirements aren't prohibitive for this accessory use. And that seems reasonable too, if you're going to allow them as a by right use. So that's where all of those months landed, and they're pretty reasonable action items, and I think that there was due consideration given to the local government perspective, because if you go to the website, there is a website dedicated to accessory dwelling units. If you were to Google Maryland Department of Planning ADU Task Force, it's the only one that'll come up, and that report is there. And when you see, it's a 48-page report, has a lot of background information, you'll see that there's reasonable consideration for even how these suggested pieces of legislation and guidance should be crafted. So I think it was overall a positive exercise. I enjoyed being a part of it. And now the speaking tour begins, because once you finish a project like this, there's a lot of conversation about it. So I did sit for a podcast recording with Mako, and so that will be aired on all podcast platforms. Fascinating topic for you to search if you'd like to listen to that. And also, I and partner members of the task force will be on a panel discussion at the MML, the Maryland Municipal League conference in August. I've also been asked to sit on, relative to the next legislative session, I've also been asked to sit on a solar solutions work group, also affiliated with Mako. This is a work group that is attempting to get some legislation together that will actually be successful. In the last several sessions, solar legislation has been put forward that just has not been practical or reasonable and has not been considerate of all of the many facets of this complicated land use. So this work group is basically going to be led by the PPRP, which is the Power Plant Research Program through the Department of Natural Resources. They staff the Public Service Commission. They staff all of the applications that come before the Public Service Commission for utility scale and for community solar. So they're going to basically host those meetings, and those meetings will also be attended by Mako representatives and members of the solar industry. So we're hoping that this year we can move forward with legislation that will be considerate of our local land use rights and also be supportive of the governor's renewable energy portfolio. I'll be pushing for equity in the distribution of meeting that portfolio, making sure that each county represents its fair share of meeting those goals. So that'll be one of my key talking points at these meetings. To report out that we held the Maryland Stormwater and Floodplain Managers, of which I'm the chair of our state committee, partnered with the Virginia Committee for Floodplain Managers, and we hosted a field tour looking at sea level rise issues in Crisfield and a tour of Smith Island. It was really well attended, and this is a group that is a mixture of private industry professionals and government representatives. And we have 2 annual conferences a year. This was our spring event. And we continue to try to partner with our neighboring states to look at these challenges on a regional basis. So, and it was a really great tour. Last year we did one at the Conowingo Dam, and that was also really successful. The last thing I want to update you on are our staff vacancies, of which we have a few. We did hire a zoning inspector. We have 1.5 vacancies with our zoning inspector team. Bill Baum will be starting with the department on the 20th of June. On the 21st of June, our inspector, Robert Owen, will be leaving us for a year on military leave. He's undergoing training under the National Guard. So we will be filling that position contractually and holding it for him when he comes back. But in the meantime, we're going to need someone since it's a year-long
half a position. How do you have a half a position?
Well, it's a full position, but it's a temporary, it's
Oh,
a contractual. Yeah. We continue to have a vacancy in our senior long-range planner position. We are going to look to a recruiting agency to help us to fill that vacancy. We have a vacancy in our permit tech staff. Longtime permit tech had relocated. We were hoping that she would still be able to stay with us and that her relocation might have been to Queen Anne's, but she ended up moving farther away. So that was a big loss to the department. She'd been with us for about, I think, over 8 years. So we're filling that position. And we also have an office coordinator position, which was a new member of our staff who really was helping us to, because he had an IT background, he was helping us to take our permitting online, which I've been telling you about. We're almost there, and we are interviewing to fill that position with an eye on filling that position with someone who does have a background in data system management so that we can continue to be successful in unrolling that citizen self-service portal. It is unrolling now. We are test driving it with frequent flyers who are local contractors who submit a lot of building permits. We're working with them now on an online submittal so that if they see any bugs, we can fix them before we open up the registration to all citizens, because what we don't want to happen is to have this platform unrolled and have citizens who are frustrated by it. So we want to make sure there will be kinks, because everyone will have to learn a new system in terms of citizens, contractors, and staff, making sure that we're managing it properly. So there will be bumps, but we want to make sure we get the big ones. Once that program is up and running successfully, the next step will be to have online licensing. And then after that, which is more difficult, online planning project submittal. That's more difficult because it takes more hardware and software. And not all of our contractors who work in our area, not all of our consultants have even the capability to make electronic submittals and signatures and the like. But that's our long-term goal.
Okay. Any questions for Amy? There being none. Notice of the critical area, is that next?
Yes.
We're doing the annual report.
In a report first.
Okay.
All right, good morning. One legislative update I wanted to give you, the go ahead, Stephanie Jones, Long Range Planner, sorry. One legislative update is the commissioners approved the non-water dependent structures on piers text amendment last month, and it will become effective June 29th. So that one did pass. It took a while because it had to go to the Critical Area Commission for their approval, so that's why it took longer than the few other text amendments we had for you a few months ago. So the first item in front of you is the 2023 annual report. So this is a report that's required annually by the MDP and also the annotated code. So what it is, it really identifies changes, whether it be land use or development, residential, commercial, also includes preservation as well as legislative changes that have occurred in that calendar year, so January to December. Doug, did you want to come up to talk about some of the changes? No? Okay. All right. Well, Doug did assist with a lot of the computations of the lot sizes and subdivision statistics, as well as the permitting statistics. So he is here if you have questions. Also, Tyler from our GIS department helped with a lot of the development capacity analysis. This was completed in the 2022 report, but it is included in this report. We're required to do it every 3 years. So it'll be done again in 2025. But if you have any questions, you can ask him. It's specifically for residential purposes, but it does not include the sewer capacity issues that we have in the Kent Narrows or KNSG plant. So take that in mind if you're looking at that data specifically, that needs to be thought about, but it's not included.
You said it was a 3-year deal, but why is it next year?
It'll be 2020, it'll be in the 2025 report. So we'll run it in 26, but it'll encompass the 2025 data.
Okay.
So does that address that? So some of the things I wanted to point out to you just that did occur last year, legislative changes, were the 20 map amendments for the comprehensive plan that were basically submitted by property owners with the comprehensive plan process. Another big change was the growth allocation for armored storage. We had a text amendment that, which is the other one I was going to mention to you. The airport text amendments, which was a MAPA and text amendment for the Pier 1 properties. Also, one item that doesn't directly come before you but has been a big discussion with the comprehensive plan was the comprehensive water and sewer plan update. Those were basically items that were identified in the comprehensive plan that needed to be done, the 10% re-rating, as well as the allocation policy being updated to address that increase in 10% capacity that would be awarded. The commissioners approved those changes to the comprehensive water and sewer plan, but we're waiting to hear back from MDE. So DPW does most of that work, but I wanted to let you know that is going through the process because the allocation policy indicates how that additional allocation will be approved in the future. Mm-hmm. So it is, it's important for us as well. Also, there was 800 acres of preservation, which is about 4 times the amount of the previous year. So that is pretty, interesting to hear that that's such a big change.
Why?
I think there was a lot more funding. I think it was the funding that had a lot to do. They were able to capture more acres.
Incentives behind that.
Yeah, I think there was just additional funding that was provided.
For the purchase easements.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Also, the QAC bike and pedestrian plan was drafted last year. It was approved this year, but just so you all are aware of that plan. Also, the annual report includes the prioritization of strategies within that report. What it does, it looks at all of the strategies that are included in the comprehensive plan. All of the departments got together and discussed those strategies to talk about really where we are in the implementation process. So this was the second year we completed that report, and it's included in the annual report every year now. But really, we added another column to this year to really point out the specific projects that the county is completing in reference to the strategies that are identified in the comprehensive plan. So really, if somebody wanted to know, well, what is the county doing in reference to this strategy, they could look and see, okay, well, this is what they've been working on and moving forward with that strategy. So what I need is a favorable recommendation to submit that plan to MDP. And if you have any questions, happy to answer.
I hear a recommendation.
Madam Chair, I move that the Queen Anne's County Planning Commission give a favorable recommendation for the 2023 Queen Anne's County Department of Planning and Zoning Annual Report to the Maryland Department of Planning.
I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So be it. Good job, Stephanie, and good job, guys.
Yes. I appreciate their help very much. All right. All right. So the next item you have before you, this is an update. It's to the modified buffer area line for the critical area line in the critical area program. Sam was within our GS department. He really helped through this process with the Critical Area Commission. Also, so what the modified buffer line is, and we're going to go over the map here in a minute, but I just want to give you the background as to what it actually is and what it does. So back when the critical area was adopted, they identified properties that really are small in nature, were already developed. If somebody wanted to develop it within the 100-foot buffer, they'd have to ask for a variance. These are all pretty much the old subdivisions in the county, also properties and areas like Kent Narrows, because it is heavily developed already. And what this line does allows property owners to develop within the 100-foot buffer without going through the variance process, but there are other stipulations and mitigation that they have to meet. So the way this was adopted in, let me go backwards here, sorry. When the 1,000-foot line was remapped for the critical area, what the county wanted to do was move forward and also adopt a digital format, and that's when we went from paper to digital with the critical area designations. They wanted to go to a digital form of the modified buffer line. So what was done was they utilized the mapping that the critical area had given to the county for the update of the 1,000-foot line, and it was decided that the modified buffer area line, the designation of those properties will be mapped on the upward side of the non-tidal wetlands. So you'll see there's a red and green dashed line. So that's what the line looked like when the modified buffer update was adopted in 2019. And then the blue line, sorry, is where it's, did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. And now we decided that the way the modified buffer area lines work is it's basically just a way to signify the properties that are applicable to these standards. And by mapping it on the non-tidal wetlands, it's really confusing to property owners why the lines are running through the middle of their property, and two, basically because these are non-tidal wetlands, or tidal wetlands, sorry, they move and shift. So why are we mapping a line that technically has to be designated by a professional indicating where tidal wetlands are? Because they move over time, and as well, it's just not clear to property owners all the time. So, and what the purpose is to really just signify that the property is designated that, not really to indicate where the tidal wetland line is. So we had decided to move this so that all the properties that are mapped modified buffer area are mapped along the shoreline. So it's just an easier way to designate those properties and a cleaner way to do so. So I'm gonna let Sam really go through how the mapping works and the shift and any other details he would like to add, because he's been here a lot longer with the GIS and mapping than I have.
Good morning, Sam Stanton, GIS coordinator. So yeah, Stephanie did a great job covering all of that. I just have a few examples here just to try and illustrate. And these are some pretty simple ones where, for whatever reason, when we updated it, critical area wanted us to follow whatever was further inland, the shoreline or the wetland line. So we followed the wetland line. These are some pretty simple examples where you can see on the left, it kind of jogged in, followed the wetlands. I think it's another, these are all pretty simple ones, but there were some other ones where, the wetlands kind of came in and they, meandered a little, and it really, really created a lot of confusion.
Go back to that last one.
Sure.
I mean, it's kind of like fascinating that blue line was the original line, correct?
The blue line is what we call the critical area shoreline. When they remapped the shoreline, now I guess, are you getting at that the shoreline doesn't seem to match what's actually there?
Oh, well,
So
kind of.
the caveat there is they digitized that shoreline from the 2008 state of Maryland imagery. I'm using in this map the most current imagery, which was 2022. So you can see
Does
how
that
much
mean
it changed.
we're gaining property, we're not losing property?
In some places like that, sure. I mean,
Okay.
especially like in the, in like peninsulas like that, as the currents move things around. Yeah, these are all basically kind of the same, just trying to illustrate how we moved it from that. I mean, that's another one where it created a lot of confusion because it jogged all the way in and went all the way up to the road. And now it's like, And like Stephanie said, it's the line really doesn't it doesn't mean anything like regulatory wise. It's just saying, hey, this property is, subject to this.
Okay.
So hopefully this is going to make it a lot easier for people to interpret. And this is also available on the property viewer with the critical area data so that homeowners will be able to see it and hopefully alleviate a lot of confusion.
And then process-wise, the critical area staff decided that because this is really just an administrative change and we're not adding new properties or deleting properties from these modified buffers, that we could just do this administratively. And we don't have to go through a mapping update process, which requires the public hearings and, the long meetings, the county commissioner approval, and also the critical area commission approval. So this is specifically an administrative change. So if, it allows us to just do it and it's done. So I was we were very happy to hear that we were able to do it in this way and not have to go through the entire mapping update. But really this is just an FYI for you if someone, happens to ask or because the map did change, you know the reasons why. So you don't have to make any recommendations or any formal decisions on this.
Okay.
So.
I'm sorry, I'm this little kid in the class. What is the modified area buffer?
Okay, so it's within the critical area. So when the critical area was adopted, properties that were potentially already developed or they were very small in nature and the 100-foot buffer, which is where you can't develop, encompassed most of the property. So there was a lot of properties, they're old subdivisions that are very small properties that were already developed at the time of critical area law, that all of those waterfront properties, if they wanted to develop, they would have had to come in and ask for a buffer variance. It really alleviates the amount of buffer variances that the county would see through the Board of Appeals. That does do that, but they also have to mitigate at a different ratio for property owners that do not have a modified buffer. So there's other restrictions.
And I'm starting to haze over a little bit here. So, it looks to me like you're just kind of doing away with the modified
No,
buffer.
we're not moving. We didn't remove anything.
Well, I beg to differ if I'm following these lines. This dotted line on your left
Okay, so the
is
left
inland, I don't know, let's call it 100 feet. And the one on the right is right on the shoreline. So you've done away with it.
Right. So there's no properties that were already modified that have been removed or properties that have been added with this process. The line is clearly just to signify that these properties are subject to those provisions. So it's kind of like if you look at a zoning map and you look at all the colors, they indicate what the property is zoned and you have to comply with those provisions. So this is just kind of the same idea, but it's a line as opposed to a polygon color. Is that kind of?
No, it doesn't explain anything to me.
Okay.
I just,
is there
no,
any
that's
other-
fine.
The
That's
way I look
fine.
at
You
it-
guys are just working
I'm
overtime.
trying to compare it
The
to
way I look
what
at
I
it
don't know.
significant.
Is if that line is next to a parcel, that means it's subject to the modified buffer provisions. And like Steph said, we could have done this by putting a star on every parcel that was subject to this. It's just an extra layer of critical area.
So let me just go back to the state. Under Comar, the modified buffer and critical area properties are identified from the shoreline back 1,000 feet, and in the case of the buffer, from the shoreline back 100 feet, and then unless it's expanded for wetlands and special species, items of special state concern. For some reason, when we updated our maps, we didn't follow the shoreline everywhere. In some places, we followed a tidal wetland line. So all we're doing is, like in that case on that property where you see the red line has come in from the shoreline, we're just snapping it back to the shoreline. That's all there is to it, because that's the state standard. We mapped it differently, and I don't know why. But it is now in line with the shoreline. So what you're seeing is not a removal, it's just moving from one mapped line to the shoreline. So that's
Okay, so
consistent.
if that's the case, then back up again Go back to the one before this.
The first one?
Oh, I'm sorry, the first one. So why did we go to the shoreline there?
We did.
No. I see property on the other side of the line.
That's the difference in the imagery. For clarity's sake, I
Are
probably
you
should
saying
have
it's
used.
not there?
It probably, if I used the 2008 imagery, which is what the state used as their baseline, because that was the last year we had an entire state's worth of imagery. They flew, I believe, they flew the entire state, and that was important to them, is they wanted a baseline. Since then, the Eastern Shore, Western Shore has been done every other year or every 3 years. And my understanding is they are planning on going back, but this has been such a long process. We were one of the first counties to update our shoreline, critical area shoreline.
But, okay, when you updated it, why wouldn't you have updated it to what it is rather than?
But we did. That's what I'm saying. If
What'd you
in this,
think?
if
What'd
in
you-
this map, if I used the 2008 imagery, you would see that that line follows the shoreline.
Let me go back to 1973. The critical area line is the state's arbitrary line. So, and that line is based on, they map it based on the best available information at the time that their regulatory changes are updated. So the last time they did
They
this
didn't
was
even have decent computers back then.
so previous to 2008, all of our critical area lines were based on the 1973 wetlands map. So, I mean, this is a huge improvement. It's more connected to real conditions. But in terms of, like Sam said, in terms of shorelines, you're never going to have a true line because of, you know, the nature of accretion and loss of land. So
Okay.
that's a regulatory shoreline.
You feel more comfortable, Mr. Sylvester?
Not really, no. So I guess I'm kind of down to one question. You did all this work. Did it improve the property owner's rights to their land? Or did it take it away? Or was there no net change at all?
There was no change.
Then what was the point, other than,
To make it-
never mind, I already know
To
the
make
answer
it
to
clear
that.
to the
I
property
know the
owners.
answer to that, that was a rhetorical question, I'm
Well,
sorry.
but no, in truth, people saw that line on their property and they thought that their setback, their 100-foot setback, or the setback that is specific to modified buffer started all the way back at that line, and it actually helps them because it makes them understand that,
Oh, yeah.
okay, my shoreline is actually way out there. I have, this wetland area is on my property and it's a part of the setback that is reviewed. So it actually does help.
Psychologically.
Yes, because it was really hard to explain it to
I
people.
think,
It's not the easiest thing to explain.
But this whole mapped modified buffer is an area of reduced standards. So property owners can build at a different standard that is more relaxed and doesn't require hearings. So the whole area is a help to the residents who live within that mapped area.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
thank you.
It all goes back to 1973.
Yes. Should I eat a snack, Joe?
Thank you. We're gonna take a 5-minute break. We're not ready for them. Back in order. Public hearings. Sharon Brinster.
Okay, so this is for the concept plan.
We can't hear you well.
Sorry. The following notice appeared in the Record Observer and the Bay Times on 5/31 and 6/7. And read as follows: Notice of public hearing, petition of David A. Bramble, Inc. The Planning Commission for Queen Anne's County hereby gives notice pursuant to the Code of Public Laws of Queen Anne's County, Chapter 18, Land Use and Development, Section 18-1-93B6 and 18-1-95E2, that it will hold a public hearing concerning the conditional use application for a proposed 31.1 acre expansion of the existing sand and gravel major extraction operation located on the south side of Grange Hall Road, south and west of Whitby Lane, Centerville, Maryland. Tax map 60, grid 24, parcel 26, tax map 60, grid 17, parcel 133, and tax map 67, grid 5, parcel 39, lot 1B. The application was submitted by the petitioner, David A. Bramble, Inc. The petitioner's proposal is made under the procedures of Chapter 18-1, Article XVII of the Queen Anne's County Code. Take notice that the application shall be considered by the Planning Commission at a public hearing on Thursday, June 13th, 2024 at 9 a.m. It is now 9:31 a.m. in the conference room at the Department of Planning and Zoning, 110 Vincent Street, Centerville, Maryland, 21617. The Planning Commission will receive testimony for or against this application. Following the public hearing, the Planning Commission will make a recommendation regarding the petitioner's proposal to the Queen Anne's County Board of Appeals. This is an open meeting, but upon compliance with the Open Meeting Act, a part or all of the meeting may be conducted in closed session. Notice of the meeting or any closed session related thereto will be posted in the lobby of the Department of Planning and Zoning, 110 Vincent Street, Centerville, Maryland, 21617. The entire petition, as well as the development site for the subject property or other relevant material, is available for review at the Department of Planning and Zoning between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, or by contacting the office with the phone number for more information. Madam Chairman, I'm satisfied that the legal notice requirements have been met to convene the public hearing.
Okay. So do we have a sign-in sheet, John? Blank? Okay. Do we have any, anyone on Zoom?
Yes, one person. Her name's Elena.
We had a different name up there a few minutes ago.
It's the same person. There's a second person that's there with the group that's.
Okay. Can you unmute them or ask them to unmute?
Do you want them to present first?
Public comment for.
You don't?
Can you hear me?
Oh, you're gonna, okay.
Yep, I have a presentation.
I thought that was gonna be after this.
Kevin, you can come, I guess you can come up now.
Well,
Did you want them to speak?
Asking if you can hear you. I think. Did you hear her?
No.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
they muted her again.
The staff report will go first. I guess I'll go ahead and start. I'm Steve Johnson. I'm a senior planner with Planning and Zoning. We're here to discuss SP 23-03-0101 for David A. Bramble. He's proposing to administratively combine 3 parcels for a 31.1 acre expansion of an existing major extraction operation in the agricultural zoning district, and is requesting concept plan approval and favorable recommendation to the board. Slide gives you a general location of the project. As you can see, it's located south of Centerville, just to the northeast of Y Mills. More specifically, the site consists of 3 parcels off of Grange Hall Road that total 136.199 acres. The applicant will administratively combine these 3 parcels to create resulting parcel 133. This is in an effort to meet minimum site requirements for major extraction operation. This administrative subdivision must be recorded prior to permit approval, and a condition was included at the end of the staff report regarding this requirement. Property zoned agricultural, major extraction is a conditional use in the ag zoning district. Here's a look at the concept plan. As you can see, access is taken via Grange Hall Road, which is circled in yellow on your screen. The LOD for this project totals 108.6 acres and includes areas of previous approvals and the 31.1 acre expansion area, which is highlighted here in dash red. The mining area totals 103.5 acres. The applicant is proposing no new impervious area or floor area. All mining setbacks are complied with this project. The existing haul and gravel access roads will be utilized. No new roads will be constructed. Water and sewer is not proposed as part of this operation. However, the Environmental Health Department has approved the use of off-site bathroom facilities at a nearby asphalt plant owned by the applicant. There's also a condition at the end of the staff report regarding this requirement. 1,853,280 cubic yards of material will be removed from the site in 27 years. This equates to an annual material removal rate of 68,640 cubic yards. And the finished depth of this mine will be 28 feet to 50 feet, and the difference in the depth of this mine is due to elevation changes throughout the site. The applicant is proposing a 5-foot wide, 4-foot tall berm along the perimeter of the expansion where no woods exist. This is the L-shaped green line that you see on your screen. A small gap in the existing landscape buffer will also be closed as part of this project. That's the circled green area on your screen. Both the berm and this area will be planted with eastern red cedar and green giant arborvitae. This project is not within the sensitive species project review area, the Chesapeake Bay critical area, or the 100-year floodplain. Stream, non-tidal wetlands, and their associated buffers are all on site. There's no disturbance proposed to these features. Steep slopes are also on site. There's no disturbance to those as well. There are 24.30 acres of woodlands on site. The applicant is proposing to clear 4 acres. This is the hatched brown and white area that you see on your screen. Major extraction operations are exempt from forest conservation under 18.2 4B10 of the code. Here are the hours of operation. I'm not going to read these. These are outlined in the staff report. This is taken directly from the site plan. They are consistent with the other mining operations in the county. Excuse me. The applicant has provided a sound study from Vibratech that indicates the operation will meet the sound requirement of 65 decibels at the property line. A copy of this was included in your packets. Trucks will continue to utilize the existing haul route, which consists of Grange Hall Road to Maryland Route 213 and Grange Hall Road to Owens Road and US Route 404. And the dash lines indicate those roads that I just mentioned. The State Highway has reviewed this project and has offered no objection to its approval. And finally, the end use for this project will be a 46.4 acre pond with a future residence. And with that, I will try to answer any questions or turn it over to the applicant.
Good morning. Kevin Sharon, DMS and Associates. Along with me to my left is Megan Bramble Owings, and to her left is Keith Dill. He is the pit manager. Also with us is Jonathan Ferdinand, who's prepared the Vibratech sound study, if there are any questions on that. And Vernon Husted is joining remotely. He's the landscape architect that designed the buffer around the pit expansion and then some enhancement to the existing pit buffer. The staff report was very comprehensive. Steve always does a great job, so I won't repeat a lot of the things that he said, but just wanted to say that we're here for a concept plan review and approval for the pit expansion and a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals for the conditional use. The pit itself, minus the 31-acre expansion, dates back to the early 80s. I think it was originally owned by the county, and then it was purchased by the Brambles at a certain point. The three parcels that make up the pit, the two existing and the one 31-acre expansion parcel, will be administratively combined at the county's request. So that plat's been submitted to the to the planning office and is under review as well. The operation, and obviously the Bramble group can speak to this more clearly, but the operation basically will not change with this expansion. The existing pit is essentially running out of material, and so the 31 acres will add that material that they need. The access will not change, the hours of operation will not change, the number of trucks coming and going will not change, so it's essentially just another area of minerals for them to mine. The plans that were submitted include the new pit limits, the haul roads that have been mapped out, both on-site and off-site, perimeter screening, as I mentioned before, and the end-use plan that was on the slide previously. I did want to point out one thing in the report, and it may have just been a carryover, but there is not a wash plant on this site, so that was, just wanted to make that clarification. I want to also point out from the staff report that there are no agencies that reviewed this application had any objections to the application. So with that, I think I would like to ask Jonathan Ferdinand to just provide a brief summary of the results of the sound study. So Jonathan, if you want to.
While we're waiting for him to come up, I wanted to ask you something. What was the time frame on the existing pit?
So the original piece closest to Grange Hall was purchased, you mean in terms of coming into ownership or
No,
mining out?
Mining out.
You know, I don't know when that first kind of triangular piece finished mining out. We purchased it kind of mid-'80s from the county, as Kevin indicated. And then later purchased that rectangular piece, and we're at the tail end of mining that out now. And when we purchased that, it was probably early 90s from what I can tell in our records. So it took from then until now to get to the last bits of sand. And there's still some material left as you move toward this, I call it the friel piece, as you move towards this new property. So it's not completely done, but we're pretty close.
Okay.
And we purchased the friel piece within the past 10 years.
Okay.
Kevin, make sure you get to that microphone.
Okay, sure.
Good morning.
Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's John Ferdinand. I work for Vibratech Engineers, 109 East First Street, Hazleton, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
As part of the project, the operation had to show that it could meet the 65 dBA noise limit for daytime operation. It's a common practice for projects like this where you just take reference noise levels from the equipment at 50 feet, then you predict or project expected noise levels to the property line. In this case, given that the equipment would stay 100 feet away and they would construct the 4-foot berm and mine into the slope as shown on the mining plan, they'll meet the 65 dBA limit at the property line.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to turn to some of the conditions that were shown in the staff report on page 6. Most of these, I think, are probably boilerplate or have been used for previous applications of pits, but there were a few that we wanted to have a discussion on, and I'll let Megan, if you wanted to go through some of the ones that were
Sure.
of concern.
Yeah, and I apologize, I didn't say my name for the record before, but Megan Owings. Kevin already touched on the wash plant, though there was 2 references on page 3, and again, we don't have a wash plant, so I just wanted to make sure we were clarifying that. And then in terms of, I did want to clarify hours of operation as well. While we don't mine on the property at night, we occasionally do night work for State Highway Administration when for the traveling public's convenience, they don't, on Route 50, for example, often they ask us to work out there at night so that the public isn't impacted. And we may, we don't mine the site at night, but we have vehicles there or may grab material from there at night. So I know that's on our site plan, those hours of operation, but I did want to clarify that there are times, in fact, last week we were doing night work. And we will, of course, be mindful to light, noise, et cetera, while we're doing those operations, but I wanted to make sure that it was on the record that there are times when we are on site but not mining in the evening, in the nighttime. With regard to the conditions, condition number 5, bonding for the landscaping, we accept that condition. I would just ask the board's consideration for it being limited to a 2 to 3 year bond for, basically a 2 to 3 year growing cycle rather than a 30-year bond. I don't know what has typically been done on mining operations, but that to us seems more reasonable, and we would ask the board's consideration to limiting the duration of that landscaping bond. As indicated, we do have our landscape architect on the phone, and we'll be repairing that one gap that was highlighted. It's not on this screen, but there was a little gap in the trees that I guess had died over the years. But also condition number 7 with regard to material storage piles cannot exceed 45 feet in height. We would ask that this condition be removed. There's not been a height restriction, and that height restriction is based off of building height. And material piles are, of course, not buildings, and also temporary in nature and fluctuating continuously. So we would request that that condition be deleted.
Can I make a statement
Sure.
on that with regard to that? Yes, the code doesn't, the conditional use standards don't contemplate material stockpile height. It's been the office's policy to utilize the agricultural zoning district's maximum building height for other, which is 45 feet. Changing that condition would not be consistent with any approvals that this board or the Board of Appeals has approved. I just wanted to make that clear.
Can you say that again for me, please?
So the conditional use standards for major extraction do not contemplate material storage height. So it's been the policy in the office to utilize the underlying zoning, maximum building height, which is 45 feet for other. All major extraction operations that have been approved since I've been here have utilized the 45-foot height restriction for storage piles.
How high would you normally go, Megan?
So we don't think that we're exceeding it. It's just a flux. It's not permanent, which a building is obviously permanent, and I understand having a restriction related to that. I mean, the code says building height, and this is not a building, but I just, sometimes we fluctuate, and talking to Kevin earlier, I don't know that this would be an issue, but it hasn't been a condition for the past 40 years, which is why we're asking the board's consideration for not making
It hasn't been a
now.
condition on this site, correct?
On this site, correct?
Would you suggest a height?
I mean, if you wanted to put a cap for us, 60 is one that we were internally talking about. I don't know that we would ever outgrow that or even get near that, but again, I don't think building height is intended for a stockpile that is fluctuating in size and is temporary. With regard to condition number 8, requires the applicant to submit as-built updates to the board. Annually, all surface mining operations have to provide the Maryland Department of Environment an annual reclamation report. That's basically a snapshot. We have to send it in every March 31st. a snapshot of what type of mining activity occurred in the past year. It's a snapshot because it's always changing. You know, we may fill in areas and then need that dirt and come back to those areas, but it shows MDE, you know, did we mine material, how much, and so they have an understanding of where we are in completing the mine out of the property. So what we would propose instead of an as-built is to provide planning with our MDE reporting every year, because an as-built to us is a much different animal, onerous, requires just more work to tell you, I think, with the same information that you're probably looking for. So we would ask the board's consideration to accepting us providing you our annual MDE report, which again, we have to do by law under the agency that regulates us.
Megan, does that involve a kind of a snapshot of the limits of where you've mined?
Yes,
and
exactly. And I
storage
think I may
piles
have sent you examples. It also, it's a site plan, and it shows exactly what you're saying, and it also is a worksheet talking about how much we actually mined that year.
Again, this is a condition that we put on this that everybody is complied with. So I guess that would be your purview to determine whether or not that would be.
Don't you think that that's exactly what they're giving you?
It's essentially the same thing.
Just
It sounds
instead
like
of
it.
to the Department of MDE to the Planning and Zoning is the only difference from their
It sounds to me like
report.
it's essentially the same
Yeah.
thing, so that's probably.
And I can
okay.
send you examples after this. I didn't bring one with me, but I think you'll find it's probably what you're looking for, because it's as-built to me is capturing something permanent, and that isn't what this is at the end of every year.
What's the name of this report that you send to MDE?
It's the annual reclamation report.
Megan, we still have another step to this. This is concept,
Yeah.
so, you know, we're going to Board of Appeals, so, I mean, should this change be made, we can discuss that. You can
Okay.
show me what you're talking about, and I can take a closer look at it.
I appreciate that, thank you. And then just really a question on number 11, we're of course fine with reviewing legal documents with the planning commissioning attorney, but just so I'm clear, that's just that one document
Just
that
the
we've
one
already.
document that used, the determination of use and the responsibility for pollution, any pollution created on site, and that will be given to the planning commission attorney prior to going to Board of Appeals. We were in flux when you sent that over.
Okay, I wanted
so-
to maybe be more specific in here because it says any legal document, and I didn't want to open up a can of worms to all legal documents getting reviewed here, so that's just a clarifying point for us. But with that, just.
Trey, did you have
request
something?
board's
I
approval.
do. Let me add something. So I'm Trey Porter with Department of Public Works. So when it comes to as-built for the volume removed and all that, we're looking at it from a stormwater management standpoint. We know that this excavation is going to provide a massive amount of volume capture, but we do recognize that you know, as-builts will be required for stormwater management, but we also understand that they do fluctuate, and it does need to represent the permanent condition. So in what is it, 20 some years or whatever?
40-some years, yeah,
Is
we
that what
haven't
it
had
is?
to do
Yeah,
this.
yeah, we'll need some documentation of what the resulting, you know, what the resulting excavation is, but we understand that it does evolve over the next, you know, several decades.
Are you saying that the MDE reclamation report won't satisfy that? I mean, I have no idea of what you're looking for. When I think of as-built, I'm thinking about what we have to do for State Highway Administration, and it's very involved,
Yeah, no.
expensive plans.
No, I think what you could do is you could have your consultant, Kevin, could probably reference that report. And then I'm assuming, I'm not familiar with those reports, but I'm assuming it has the information that we would look at for the as-built. So it's probably going to be after Kevin retires and maybe several of his predecessors.
I read this to mean you want it annually. Are you not saying that? Because if you don't want it annually, that's no problem to do an as-built at the end.
No, I think.
I might not be here either.
We just want something from the engineer saying that as this project progresses, that there's adequate stormwater management, and we know that there is, because everything drains inward towards any depression on site. So Well, we can write a letter and accompany it with the MDE report. Exactly.
Okay.
That would be
If
fine.
that works, that's fine. That sounds.
No
more-
connotation
more-
of an
as-built is going out there and field
No,
surveying.
no additional work.
Yeah.
Just the
Yes.
reference and tying that into and something saying that.
Site visit and
Yep.
document it.
Yep, that's fine.
better than the as-built.
And Megan, I wanted to point out one other thing regarding the landscaping bond.
Yes.
They're usually only for 2 to 3 years. It's not a 30-year.
Yeah, so
requirement.
this said duration of the operation period.
Yeah, I can make a change to
Okay.
that, yeah.
Thank you.
I'll make a change to that condition.
Thank you for your consideration, and we would request approval.
With regard to I have a question for you. With regard to the wash station, the washing plant, I say at a nearby wash plant for a supplemental process. Do you have one across the street at the, I could have sworn I saw information that said that. We'll have to look back through, Kevin, and make sure.
Asphalt plant, but
Okay.
not wash.
I didn't know if
plant.
there was a wash plant over there. Okay, no problem. That's fine. Yep, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Are you, the report I thought said you were taking a common borrow and, what was the other one?
I think it said-
Pardon me? Topsoil. Topsoil, thank you. That's an awful lot of topsoil to take out for 30 years. I don't think there's that much, but I thought I heard you say you're taking sand out. I'm just curious what you're doing.
Chance to talk, Keith.
Keith-
Introduce yourself.
Keith Dill with David A. Bramble. So basically what we're going to do is there's topsoil, which will be stripped. There's overburden, and it varies anywhere from 8 feet to, in some places we understand, 15 feet of overburden, which is not a mineral that's used traditionally in asphalt production. So we'll remove that. And a lot of that overburden is usable for common borrow on building sites, building upgrade, grade elevation, that sort of thing. And then we'll get down to the sand layer. The sand layer is what we are after. That's what we'll extract for use at the asphalt plant to make our hot mix with. But everything will be used that we strip prior to the sand layer.
Trey, did you have a question?
I do. I have another appointment. I have another meeting coming up, and I just want to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions. Stormwater management on mines is generally very simple. Everything drains inward, so there's no quantity issues, generally speaking. In terms of roads issues, they're using existing entrances, egress entrance, so we don't really have any issues with that. State Highways already commented, and they don't have any concerns. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. Anyone? I think you're good.
Thanks for the offer,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to go back to condition number 5 again, Megan, about the landscaping. I just wanted to clarify so you understand that what it's saying is all landscaping required shall be maintained to assure plantings remain alive and healthy during the operation period. So you have to keep all the plants alive and healthy during the entire operation. That's the landscaping bonding is a separate part of that condition. So there's no date set on
Okay.
the bonding within that condition, just so you're aware. Yep.
That's all we have.
Go ahead. On that, may I? Steve, I'll start with you, because I don't know the answer to the question. In many of our buffer requirements, buffering for solar, I know, we've done more of those recently. But with respect to the species chosen, they have to be native. I don't know that this giant green arborvitae is native to the shore.
There's no requirement for native species within these landscape requirements for major
For
extraction.
extraction, but they are
That's
for
specific
solar.
for solar, yes.
They are, okay, just
Yep.
want to make that clear. So the giant green arborvitae is permitted as a species to be planted here?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And you're saying that's all you have, Kevin?
Yes, we would entertain your approval of the concept plan and a
Okay.
favorable
Is there any other
recommendation.
questions
I
from the
have
board?
just one more.
Okay.
You've got homes in this neighborhood. I assume you have a prohibition against jake breaks?
As long as we know about problems, we monitor them with our fleet. I actually met, and she may still be back here, I met a citizen this morning who was telling us about some noise, tailgate banging, which of course we, again, try to monitor with our fleet, and we encourage her and hope that we'll meet her and her daughter at some point too. They live across the road on Grange Hall. If we know about a problem, we will address a problem. But we always tell our fleet to be mindful of our neighbors. We want to be a good neighbor.
There's a condition, if you look at condition number 14, it mentions that.
There'll be signage, which there may be some signage now, but there is a condition in here requiring signage to remind our drivers. But of course, we also have to verbally remind the drivers as well to make
Gotta
sure that
remind
we're in compliance.
Okay.
Your question about landscaping, even though it's not required, you can highly encourage them to use native species.
Right, understood. I think the giant green is found in Maryland. I just don't think it's considered a native. And it's potentially problematic, right? The arborvitae, they just grow massively fast, so people love them. They're instant, they call them neighbor haters, colloquially, to screen, because they grow a foot, 18 inches a year in certain conditions. But they become problematic because they get top heavy, especially when you plant them on berms, right? Disturbed soils.
And they're shallow
Shallow
roots.
rooted, so you get a storm, heavy saturation, some wind, and now you're going back to replant. Mr. Husted, I've worked with before, he's certainly an RLA, he knows what he's doing, but I would certainly encourage you, not only because I think native species are better, just in general, but it may save you in the long run from picking up after a poor choice made early on. I do landscaping and I love them. People pay me to buy them, plant them, and then 10 years later to pick them up, take them up and take them to Mr. Baker's because they blow over.
Well, we can certainly review that and make sure that we're picking the right species for that.
I mean, it's not in the wetlands, it's not in critical area, I get all that, but as far as a maintenance perspective from the owner, from the landowner, it may be a better choice to go something that's gonna have deeper roots, that's gonna sit up on those berms, provide you with the visual and audible screening, but won't be, top heavy and tipsy in certain weather situations.
I would ask, why are there two standards?
One for solar and one for extractions? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean, yes, but why are there two standards? Why are they different?
Not sure. You have any input, Rob?
Everyone's looking around.
I know you've done a lot more solar than I have, so.
Rob Gunter, Department of Planning and Zoning. I don't have a reason why there's two, except that the extraction code predates the solar
older,
code
right.
by a significant amount. And there are no specific landscape standards for this to say, other than to say there needs to be an adequate buffer. The solar buffer is very prescriptive, 50 feet wide, no more than 50% of the plantings can be non-native species. Then they go into percentages of how many of certain species you can have, understory, shade trees, shrubs, and so on and so forth. We'd be happy to apply that to the extraction. The applicants may not like that because it's a substantial buffer for solars.
They're also permitted in different areas. Solar versus a mine.
Well, they're both permitted in the ag and countryside, so that's the same. The solars have the overlay district, so it's a little bit more narrow. But they're both industrial uses with potential to have residential neighbors.
Well, we have a code. Why would we have to require them to do more than what the code says? That doesn't seem very fair for a landowner.
Typically,
Unless the code
No, I
gets
agree,
changed.
I agree. I don't.
I'm sure you did.
I don't disagree.
typically the extraction uses provide berms.
Yeah.
And we ask and almost tell them they need berms because everybody else has done berms, so that reduces the number of trees that are required. Solar never does berms, ever. So then your buffer needs to be wider so that you can't see through it.
Thank you.
I have a question for council and/or staff. So, given the discussion on the conditions that are here, that will be part of any resolution that's made, on number 4, given what Megan talked about, sometimes going outside of the hours for state highway work, would that impact the inclusion of number 4 as is? Like, would she have to get additional approvals if they were working outside of the hours prescribed for whatever?
What do you do now at the plant? When you have to work at night, anything? Do you do anything with the neighbors or Anybody?
We just are mindful of if we have lights, that they're pointing down, if we have a light plan on at the plant. And we're talking about across the road at the asphalt plant, for that piece.
But your hours of operation are pretty much over by 6 o'clock, right?
On a typical day, yes. If we're doing night work, they start 9 o'clock, go through until 5 a.m., I think.
Normally, 8 or 9 p.m. to normally no later than 5 a.m.
And again, it's rare, we don't, it's hard on our operations to do night work, but it is always a trade-off for the traveling public, especially in the summertime, to not impact them. But we, try to be good neighbors and haven't heard complaints, but like I said, I've encouraged, if there are complaints, please come tell us so that we can address it.
Is it full operation?
At the plant, yeah, we're making hot mix and paving.
And so I was just going to note, you can consider that request favorably or unfavorably. And if you are inclined to consider that alteration favorably, then that condition could just be updated to note that you acknowledge, and I wrote it down the way she described it, that you acknowledge that there may be night work affiliated with state highway projects at times, but on site there will be no mining after the hours indicated, if you were inclined to support that request.
Well, isn't this for operations? Isn't that pretty much for mining? I mean, it's not for hauling, is it?
And that's how I read it, but I wanted to make sure we were all aware.
I'm trying to get there, so, okay.
I think you could also just say mining operations. Just add the word mining.
Any changes in the hours of mining operations? Okay.
Additional approval
I
for
would-
mining operations.
I would be as specific as you can with this condition, just so there's no issues in the future.
That's why we're putting in for mining operations.
Okay,
Which would
and then-
allow everything else except for mining.
Right.
Okay, and then on number 5, is it necessary after surety bond to put not to exceed 3 years?
I don't think that's necessary.
Number 7, are we gonna, you want to stick with the 45 feet? Okay, I'm just asking staff, okay. Number 8, given the discussion around number 8, could it just be submits annual as-built updates to the Board of Appeals and Department of Planning and Zoning, annual as-built, and leave it at that?
Well, she didn't want
Because
to
the
do
rest of it,
as-built.
the rest of it
As-built,
references on the anniversary of, and I know
Kathy.
that you were talking about the report you do is March the
we
31st.
want to get rid of the words as-built because when you do an as-built, it's a lot, it's really involved and it's expensive to do.
So annual updates.
Megan, how did you refer to that again?
We call it it's the MDE's form as the annual reclamation report.
Substituting
Annual
that for an as-built.
reclamation reports would
Report.
probably be okay. Yep.
Okay, and then where it starts on the anniversary of, can we eliminate that, or
You can make it yearly. Yeah, that's fine.
it's just annual?
Just annual report.
Have you seen the reclamation report?
I have not seen theirs, no.
Okay, I mean, I would assume that, if we get into this and then you realize that it's not what you thought it was, that you'll let us know so we don't make the same mistake twice.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm assuming,
Well, you could also,
Guys
at
are
this point,
right up front with
say,
this, but
since it's concept plan, work with staff to determine whether to use the annual reclamation report or
That's good.
What was that? I'm sorry.
just to say to work with staff to determine whether annual reclamation report or an as-built update.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the Board of Appeals can set the final conditions. You can set the preliminary to just say that the applicant will work with staff to determine whether an as-built or the reclamation report provides adequate information. And if it does, then we can change the final condition to the Board of Appeals, which is really where a lot of these will fall in their decision letters.
And I understood Mr. Porter's comments to be, he would want Kevin to weigh in on the stormwater management side of it, and that's fine. I think it would just be a review, and he can accompany the letter with some sort of.
And Steve will add that
cover
into the Board of Appeals condition.
Yeah.
When we determine which of these two things we want. And we can say to include an annual stormwater report from the applicant's engineer, blah, 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 whatever. We'll work with Trey for that exact language, and the applicant, and make sure that everything is sufficient there.
Okay.
Add that they need an as-built at the end? I'm not sure, I'm just asking.
So we will be, when this mine is mined out for MDE, we will be required, and I think there may be something on here too as well for the final reclamation report, which I think is what the county required as well. But I know for MDE, we'll have a final plan of here's what this site looks like at the end.
Any other questions? Okay, public comment? Do you have anything?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, my name is Elena Haddad. I've lived across the quarry for probably about 30 years. First, I guess I want to address the nighttime work that they're doing for the state that sometimes goes weeks at a time. Sometimes it feels like longer than that. I'm curious if the 60 dBA for the daytime is similar to what it needs to be at night, because the trucks that bang their tailgates, it's certainly pretty loud, and we have filed complaints. And it's, interesting to me that the wildlife seems to be reducing, and we're gonna take away more trees and dig away topsoil, and we're gonna expand this. And another thing is that this project has been going on for how long? And now we're gonna add another 30 years. When my parents bought the property, they were told it was maybe one day gonna be a park. So this was, what, a 60-year project when they bought the property in 1990, so let's say 2 or 3. It's like, so that's wild to me, but possible, I guess. So we're running out of sand, so we wanna take more land to get more sand. It's like, when does that, but if we end up losing more sand, are we gonna expand and then get more sand somewhere else? It's like, when does that, where's the line for when we stop digging into our county's land right there? Brambles owns many other properties in more, not as crowded areas. I know Y Mills isn't gonna have a representation, and we're technically Centerville, which is wild, okay? But the county line is right there at Route 50. We don't really have a lot of representation for what happens right there. But there's dust that covers everything every year. The amount of dust that has to be power washed off of the side of the homes. And I would love to show you what comes out of the pool every time we open it, because of everything that comes from that quarry. It's like, I have never once had any representation from the quarry come to us as neighbors, or speak to us and ask us, hey, how's this going? How's it going for you? How can we make it better for you? This is going to be happening this month. There's going to be loud noises. Hey, just so you know, if you work at night, or if you work in the daytime and you have to sleep at night, and you live right there, it's gonna be loud. Maybe let us know, but no, it's super loud. It's and they're not allowed to bang those truck beds. Like she said, they're not, and it's written in the trucks. You can't do this, but they do it because it's easier to get the sand out of the bed if they bang it, because then it just comes right out instead of using a brush, And nobody wants to talk about the animals. There was nothing about like the amount of animals that this could affect. But it's like, hey, that's like fine, you know, we don't have to. And so it's, you know, that's how I'm feeling about it. It's 31 acres. It looks really small on that little map on the screen, but that's a lot of land. Our house is on 1 acre. When I imagine 31 of my properties, that's a lot of land. That's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anyone else? Marshall?
Oh, sorry, nobody else.
Okay. Is there anyone in the room that would like to do public comment?
It's all right, I didn't realize.
You need to come up, introduce yourself.
My name is Sue Huddix. I had chatted.
No. When you get to the microphone, you can sit down and
Sure.
take a breath and give
Yeah.
us your name.
Oh, I
and-
don't think I'll go quite as far as Elena did, but, hi, my name is Sue Haddix, and that was my daughter. She's very passionate. She's in New Orleans at the moment. That's why she's Zooming, so. Basically, what she said, a lot of it is true. I didn't realize I had to sign in. I spoke with the folks here out in the hallway once I got here and never
That's
knew I
okay.
was supposed
We
to
got it.
sign
We
in.
got you covered.
So they explained, they answered a lot of my questions. They've agreed to meet with us, quite a few of our neighbors. Basically, what Elena said in a nutshell is true, that we've had all these things happening. We were misled, but it wasn't Brambles that misled us. It was our real estate agent. And she said 4 or 5 years, don't worry, it'll be gone, it'll be a park. So what she did say about the dirt, the soot, well, not so much soot, but the dust and the dirt is very true. Cannot sit outside without washing, wiping everything down. Again, we had no idea all this would be the case when we moved there. We've been there since '94. And we moved here to Queen Anne's County to offer a safe environment, great schools. I've taught here, I've worked here in this county since we've been here. My daughter went through all the schools. We had a lot of reasons for moving here. And it's unfortunate that these things happen. We talked about the tailgates, we talked about it at night, because it is at night, and it is during the day. It is frequent, maybe not as spread out as Elena said, but it does happen a lot at night. And they've agreed to meet with us and chat and see if we can come up with something. I don't know how much wetting things down is going to stop all that from coming over, because there's trees there, but it's still, we are directly across from it. I mean, you know, you could walk across the street and you're there. So I don't know what changes can be made to help us now. And her concern, and our neighbors as well, is that it's going to continue in another spot.
Does your daughter live with you or have another home?
She has two. She has our home in New Orleans. She's up here. She just moved down there about a year ago, but her legal residence is still here in Centerville, and she's up here every month.
Is her property separate from your property, is what I'm asking,
She's
in
on
Queen
our
Anne's County?
property. No, she's with us. She's with us. The
Okay.
property she owns is in New Orleans. It just, you know, it was just frustrating. We were worried because, again, about the expansion, and that's the word that you are using, it is an expansion, and what it's going to do for our community. And I did gain a lot of good knowledge about the recycling of the materials, how it's reused, and how it benefits our community, the state, et cetera. I just would like it to be as user-friendly for the neighbors as well as our environment. And yes, I know they employ a lot of folks. I'm hoping that we can meet with them. I don't know if it truly will be able to make a difference, but it's been something that has gone on the whole time we're here, and I never wanted to move because of that, because we love Centerville. We're considered, like she said, we are literally at 50 and 213. So, but we're considered Centerville, even though Y Mills is closer than town. We're 7 miles out of town. So I don't know if any of this has any bearing. I just want you to consider, the other aspect of being the neighbors. And we never really knew who you were supposed to contact. They did, you know, we had somebody contact the EPA, but they didn't have any record of it. So, and that was a year or two ago about the asphalt, about smoke. They did have a fire. We discussed that outside as well. So, I mean, there are, you know, you do get the smell of the stuff when it's being, I guess, crushed and moved, whatever, when it's being moved. But, you know, I don't know if that's the catch-22 of living where we live. But we did not know it would be like that. And unfortunately, you know, we were warned that there was a hunting preserve behind just because they had to, because of the guns and whatnot. And, but this was never, you know, brought to anyone's attention. There's only 10 houses, you know, it's our little community. So I don't know. I don't know if this expansion, what it's going to do for others in that area. There's not as many houses back there, no. You know, you got Owings Roads goes back. But it's just something that, you know, that we wanted to speak about. And excuse her passion, she's quite passionate. She's an artist, that doesn't help matters any. But she, you know, she speaks from her heart. She researches, she did a lot of research on this. She's the one that let us know. She's the one that let all the neighbors know. And unfortunately, they're all at work and we didn't know about the letter having to come in beforehand. And so they did not write any letters. But here I am because I teach and I'm finally off. Yay. And I just wanted to make our presence known that as the neighborhood, because some of us have lived there the entire time. Not a lot of people moved on, but, you know, there are some of us that have been there. But a lot of the stuff she said was very accurate, especially about the dirt and whatever, the particles that come over. And I can't imagine that that's healthy. But again, we've been there almost 31 years, so it hasn't changed, and I don't know that it will, but they talked about wetting it down more and whatnot, and the tailgates and the night working. But we'll see. I mean, we're very willing to meet with them, and they seem very open.
Okay.
So.
They
but-
seem to be very willing to work with you.
Yes, and I hope that they can actually, working with us, make changes. You know, not just verbally say, well, we can do this, but for it to actually take place and happen. That would be the end game. So thank you, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
morning. Appreciate it. And thanks
Thank
for
you.
listening to Elena. Excuse me.
Do we have any other people want to speak? Nope. Marshall says no, no one else in the room.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question of Mr. Ferdinand with respect to these nighttime levels in residential? He clearly stated that the mitigation proposed will comply with both the residential day limit and commercial day limit, but no mention of nighttime limits. I see it in your chart here, but I don't see it in the narrative.
Yeah, so the analysis was done for the expansion area, not the existing operation.
But you have in table 1, you have a night limit not to exceed 55 decibels and for residential. Is that just a standard, or is that a measured?
That's the standard. That's the Maryland noise standard, 65 during the day, 55 at night. Because their hours of operation are only during the day, I only applied the daytime limit for the equipment.
So you
that
have
they're
no
doing.
That's for mining.
That's for mining.
Oh, that's for the mining, for the
Right.
extraction, sorry. Yeah,
Right.
okay.
You only did the test for mining, correct?
That's right.
Right. Thank you. And just for my, knowledge and others, when you're measuring these equipment, you're measuring them at operating, levels, not idling?
Operational levels.
So
yeah.
normal, 8, 10 speed? All right, thank you.
So can I get if there's no other comments, questions anymore? Bill?
I was gonna try to keep my mouth shut, just can't. To Ms. Haddock's comments, the suggestion, which is not really a suggestion, that we'll probably give with regards to this expansion. Number one,
is proper controls and methods are maintained to minimize truck mud tracking or dust plumes in dry times with wind drift suppression. Okay, that's number one. It said the facilities must be adequately designed, maintained to free dirt and debris from the wheels, undercarriage of the truck prior to entering Grange Hall Road. That's number two. So number one, number two deal with dust and dirt. Okay, and so they're required to do that. And you know, my suggestion would be that if you think that they're not abiding by what they agreed to, you call the zoning office. You have a zoning code enforcement officer. Is that the right term?
That's correct.
That's what you do. But keep in mind, I live just a few miles from you. I'm the token farm boy here. We live in a dusty area. It's my wife's number one complaint about our home. She's constantly dusty. And she's, you know, if we go over 10 miles an hour up the lane, she's fussing. But it's dusty. It's rural. It's not probably all their fault. Okay? That's all I got to say. I think I'm not supposed to respond to her, but I couldn't help it. It's number one, number two.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Teddy, you got any questions?
Well, we're just considering the expansion, correct?
Exactly, and it's for the mining
And the expansion is
expansion.
just to provide materials so that existing operation can continue. But we're not looking at the existing operation in this,
Exactly.
in this concept. Okay.
We're extending the life of.
Okay. Can I get a,
Madam Chair, I'd like to offer a resolution, please. Be it resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by David A. Bramble, Inc. for concept plan approval for a 31.1 acre expansion of an existing major extraction operation in the agricultural zoning district, which is more particularly described in Planning and Zoning File SP-23-03-0101, hereby finds the concept plan is consistent with the goals and objectives of the Queen Anne's County zoning and subdivision regulations and the 2022 comprehensive plan, and hereby grants concept plan approval subject to the following conditions. Number one, proper controls and methods are maintained to minimize truck mud tracking or dust plumes in dry times with wind drift suppression. Number two, the facilities must be adequately designed and maintained to free dirt and debris from the wheels and undercarriage of trucks prior to entering Grange Hall Road. All soil conservation district approvals are maintained. Any changes in the hours of mining operations will require additional approvals. All landscaping required shall be maintained to assure plantings remain alive and healthy during the operation period. The applicant shall provide a cash deposit, surety bond, or letter of credit for all landscaping. Number six, haul trucks shall adhere to the approved haul route as discussed and presented. Number seven, material storage piles cannot exceed 45 feet in height. Number eight, that the applicant work with staff to determine as to whether an as-built report update or an annual reclamation report is sufficient. Number nine, the applicant agrees to an annual inspection. Number 10, all state permits are in place prior to final permitting by Queen Anne's County. Number 11, any legal documents are reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission attorney. Number 12, any future mining phases or changes to the end-use plan must return to the Planning Commission for a recommendation to the Board of Appeals for an amendment to the conditional use. Number 13, any and all financial sureties for reclamation, landscaping, stormwater management, and enforcement, et cetera, are in place before final permits are granted. 14, there shall be no truck parking on Grange Hall Road, no stacking or parking outside of the gate, no Jake brakes, no tailgate slamming either on-site or on the public road. The applicant shall post a sign with a notice regarding these restrictions. Number 15, any requirements by the Queen Anne's County Roads Department must be satisfactorily addressed. Number 16, per the Department of Environmental Health, employees are to utilize off-site restroom facilities at the nearby asphalt plant owned by the applicant. should a scale house be constructed in the future. An approved sewage reserve area and on-site restroom facilities will be required. Number 17, the administrative subdivision must be approved and recorded prior to permit approval. And number 18, any outstanding documentation or comments stemming from agency reviews are addressed prior to permitting.
Any questions? All in favor?
A second.
Second?
Madam Chair?
No.
I'd like to amend the current resolution to include findings and facts from the staff report, if I may. To include with the original motioner's approval, to include the following. The project is located within the agricultural zoning district. And one of the purposes of that district, or the intention, is to preserve and protect the areas of the county that are predominantly in agricultural use. In accordance with 18.1.14C7, major extraction is a conditional use in the ag zoning district. The operation currently complies with the following required mining setbacks: 50 feet from any lot line, 125 feet from the street, 200 feet from residential or commercial district boundary line. That environmental health has approved the use of off-site restroom facilities by the employees at the nearby asphalt plant. The noise generated by the use will not exceed residential noise daytime limits of 65 dBA at the property line and 55 at nighttime as required by COMAR. And the proposed stormwater management has been reviewed and approved by Department of Public Works, period.
Do I get a second on the amendment?
Second.
And do I get a second on the changed proposal?
Second on that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So be it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
I
you.
think we have one,
Recommendation for
we
the
have
Board of Appeals.
one more.
We're not done yet.
What?
Well, we still have, we're not done.
Just,
Second motion there.
yeah, Madam Chair, I said be it resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by David A. Bramble, Inc. for a 31.1 acre expansion of an existing major extraction operation in agricultural zoning district, which is more particularly described in Planning and Zoning File SP-23-03-0101, hereby forwards a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals under Sections 18.1-14 C7 and 18.1-95E.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Now you're.
Now we're done.
Thank you again.
Gotta get to 10:30 now.
So we have some administration things to handle. Amy, can you come back up? And I guess Stephanie, because I'm a little confused about one of the reports that I'm looking for. Yeah, this one.
Also, don't
Oh,
forget-
Stephanie's not here.
Okay, well, she can come back across the hall.
Also, don't, that's opportunity for public before you close out.
Right. This report. So I see that we're way past due on at least one of them, no, actually two of them. So what happens to them? They get their hands slapped or what?
I'm sorry, which report?
So it says that we're only gonna do these reviews every 2 years. And it's,
6-month
So-
update.
Oh, you're talking about the 6-month update?
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
if no significant work is done on site by the end of 2 years, the plan becomes void.
so, okay, evidently, these are, it says like I haven't approved the
Yeah, so the-
conditional approval for an extension.
So, once
Sorry,
they
I
get
can't find
approval
it.
by the planning commission, the
Hit that
clock
right-hand
doesn't
bottom.
start.
Flip it over. There you go.
Sorry,
You
go
okay?
ahead.
I
I'm
didn't want to
sorry, I
interrupt you.
just can't find the sheet.
Yeah, the clock doesn't start ticking on the 2-year time period until it's signed by the chair.
So what's
We-
preventing me from signing this stuff if, besides not having it here to sign?
They have remaining edits that haven't been made, and they just haven't submitted it to
So
our
they
office
can
for
stay
review.
in perpetuity?
That's correct.
So then what's the purpose of having a 2-year limit? I'm just confused over the
The
whole
code
issue.
doesn't, the code stipulates that a plan isn't finally approved until it receives signature. They have to come to you, and then you issue conditional approval, just like this did. Until all of those conditions are met, they can't get it signed. We won't allow it to be signed. And a lot of times, this happens. Projects will come in, they'll get their approval, and then they just sit because people don't have the money, they don't want to spend the money that is required. They really haven't done all the legwork, maybe their easements. They said we're going to get parking easements or access easements when they really haven't worked it out with the neighbors. There's a whole litany of reasons why the project just won't come in. But yeah, it's in perpetuity, and if there are any major code changes.
This is really our perpetuity list, not a 6-month project update.
That's why things a lot of times don't come off that list, to be quite frank, is because they come to you, they get verbal approval, and it just waits until signature, and then it'll pop off.
And this is really just since you started keeping the list, there's probably even more from.
I won't name names, but Stephanie and I worked on a project recently that was just recently approved by you that hasn't been signed yet, but that project was 08, 07? I mean, there was just a big solar project that came in 17 that just got approved. I won't name that name either, but then they come in and they rush us and rush us and rush us. It hasn't been submitted for signature yet either. And they're under time limits because they told the Public Service Commission, we're going to start by X date, and they're conditioned on that, and they still haven't come in.
And this isn't abnormal. I mean,
Yeah.
this isn't specific to our code. This is the nature of development review. And it was a waste of everyone's time to keep bringing these things back.
The 6 months, when they were coming back for 6 months, it was based on planning commission approval at that point. And that's why you kept seeing projects come in here. I mean, I did one that was like on number 15 or something.
Was that Slippery Hill? Because they were a
But I won't
long
name that
time.
name either, but it was a developer in the county, a well-known developer, and it still hasn't been built. But they'd come back every 6 months and, oh, we're poor, we don't have the money, or COVID was a big excuse for a while, a legitimate one for a little while, but not still. But that was a big expense. They're paying an agent to write a letter to show up, and they're taking time out of their day when the code dictates already when it starts ticking, and they'd have 24 months after signature.
Okay. And public comment? Do we have any public comment? There not being any, we have one more. We have an administrative thing. Would like to introduce our new and our new lawyer for the Planning Commission, Lindsay Ryan. Can you tell us about yourself and your background?
Sure, yeah. And first, apologies for being late again. I went to the wrong building and it won't happen again. I can say I've never been late to a hearing or a meeting before, so it will not happen again.
Well, we blame that on the whole election cycle because it displaced a lot of meetings and it really has discombobulated several boards. So it was unusual that we were meeting at the Liberty Building.
Yes, and
So-
I correlated that with your all's meetings, and now I know that they're here until the actual election in November, and then we'll do it all over again. And then I'll probably come here instead of there. But I'm Lindsay Ryan. I appreciate the opportunity. I was born and raised in Easton, so Talbot County. I went to Roanoke College in Virginia, and then I went to University of Baltimore. I've been practicing in Easton since I graduated. Largely what I do is land use, municipal government. I represent other local governments on the Eastern Shore, including Trapp, Oxford, Denton now, Queenstown on a limited basis. Federalsburg and Greensboro, so I'm very familiar with the land use and application of town and county codes and zoning ordinances. I have a husband. We currently live on Oxford Road, and we have 2 sons that are 6 and 2.5 and very talkative and busy. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to add that Lindsay has been our Board of Appeals attorney for 2 years. And lately, Sharon Brinster and I and the rest of staff have been in our transition, and Sharon has been very supportive and great, and has also been very helpful in helping Lindsay with our transition. We've met, talked about projects, talked about procedures, and kind of agreed to use this opportunity as a nice transition into our new era.
And we'd like to thank you for taking over after Chris passed. And just for a little knowledge for everyone here is Chris was looking at Lindsay to probably take over for him when he retired. I don't know if you knew that, but
I
that
did
was
on a
his expectations.
I on a limited basis. I found out much more, unfortunately, after the occurrence. I wish we had had more time to do a full transition when he was ready. Unfortunately, it's not always the way that it works, but I recognize and value his consideration of me to continue on in that role.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And Sharon, we can't thank you enough for stepping in and taking over and keeping us on the narrow path that we have to follow.
You're not going anywhere, right? You're not going anywhere. Okay, good.
Okay, so is there any other business? If not, can I have my favorite? Mr. Sylvester?
Madam Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Second? Any second? Second, Kathy? Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
I was driving here.